afternoon, everyone. Thank you. Welcome to, hope everybody's having a great startup week. Have you seen any, and when I ask questions, feel free to chat and respond, but hopefully you've seen some good sessions and we're interested in hearing what you've learned so far and what you're hoping to learn today. We're going to just jump right into this just with some introductions. I'm Paul Richardson. I'm a mentor and trainer with Minneapolis Business Mentors. We are a nonprofit group. We'll talk about a little bit more, but I'm probably maybe the only or one of the few that's not a retired mentor. I'm a freelance marketing consultant and also work with a marketing agency in town. Joining me is Julie Menton, who also with our group, and Julie is a retired sales and marketing executive. She's also one of my mentors. So Julie was my boss years ago when we worked at Carlson Marketing Group back in the 90s. So Minneapolis Business Mentors, just real quick commercial before we get started, since we are it's a painless commercial because we're an all volunteer nonprofit group. And so we are, the mission of our group is we aim to give back to the community by helping to provide mentoring and advice for the next generation of business leaders. So small businesses, entrepreneurs, people that are both active with a small business or maybe kicking the tires and looking to get into one. And we provide a variety of free business mentoring and advice services, including workshops and webinars like this one. Of course, as the name implies, we provide one-to-one mentoring. We also provide business plan advice, so anything, an overall plan. We also provide business plan services. So we have, if you don't have a particular plan in mind, we have both some online and offline tools to help you get started with that. One of the things that's unique about us is we have an executive advisory council. And what that means is that you can come forward with a plan, either something you want to get input on from a number of business leaders, and we will put together a panel for you. And you can present your idea. It might be about getting into a business or exiting a business, or maybe a change in strategy or an acquisition, what have you. Whatever that topic is, you can put together your questions and present it, and we'll get a relevant panel together to respond. The only service that has a fee is we have a CEO peer roundtable group, and so there's a fee for facilitating that, and so that gives you a chance to meet with other CEOs, and we'll match people in groups, and they can be mostly self-directed, but we provide facilitation for that. We also have a variety of online resources on our website, mbmentors.org, and we also have an award program there, which we'd encourage you to learn about for people who are actively receiving mentoring from our group. There's a program in honor of one of our founders who passed away last year from COVID. So there's cash prizes, and it's a great way, again, to recognize businesses who are seeking out mentoring and using mentoring as a way of moving their business forward. So Ted Lasso is kind of relevant, I think, because of the Emmys this week. Does anybody know what Ted Lasso and Sharon have to say about mentors? And feel free to answer in the chat if you happen to know what Ted Lasso and no, there have to be. Is anybody watching Ted Lasso? I know it's on Apple TV, which isn't everywhere, but. Well, Sharon says, if I'm going to be your mentor, I have to be your tormentor once in a while. So Ted said, "Ooh, I like that," and she says, "I knew that you would." So we try not to do too much tormenting, but it was it's a great show, actually, just on the topic of mentor, because Ted's a great coach and a great mentor as part of that. So when we're operating and working with our clients in Minneapolis Business Mentors, some of the problems that we're frequently asked to solve that people come to us with is relevant to today's topic. So things like, where should I get started with my marketing efforts? Or I know we need to do things differently, but I'm not sure where to start. Or they might say, I wish my revenue stream was more predictable. Or I have someone who helps me, like an employee or freelancer, but they're more tactical and not strategic. And commonly they say, hey, I want to double my sales in the next 2 years or 3 years or whatever time period. How do I get started with accelerating my sales? When we ask them, what they've tried and why that hasn't worked, we kind of see a lot of the same answers. Things like, well, it's either trying to do it yourself and maybe trying to do too much yourself all at once. There might be an in-house team. There might be consultants that they're working with, or freelancers, or agencies, or systems that they're using, or family members, what have you. But they may not be holistic solutions. They might be a cookie cutter solution. There might not be the right experience or the right follow through. There might be a sort of a fire, aim, ready approach to this. So not great planning, and that results in poor results. So lack of measurable results, low ROI, lack of growth. So I think Abraham Maslow had a great quote. Sometimes what we see is I suppose it's tempting if the only tool you have is a hammer to treat everything as if it were a nail. And sometimes when people come to a problem with a particular solution, they're looking at that every problem the same way. So the question is there a better approach? And what we've learned, from research, and I'm a great believer in managing with data, people don't plan to fail. And if you've ever worked in sales, or especially I worked at Prudential, my first job out of college, working in marketing, and anybody who's worked with insurance knows the rest of that sentence is people don't plan to fail, they simply fail to plan. And that's true with marketers sometimes as well. But the good news is that organized marketers, those that plan, are something like 4 times more likely to report success than those that don't. And those who actively plan their projects and campaigns are 356% more likely to report success. So I think the lesson here is it's telling us it's time to plan and take a planful approach towards growth. So the best way to do that and to get started is to make sure you're diagnosing before you're prescribing. And so what I mean by that is starting with a discovery process of learning as much as you can about this current situation for yourself, for the market that you're in, for your competitors, and most importantly for your customers or those who you'd like to be your customers. And so once you've done that, the next step really is defining success measures and planning, like how am I going to measure success, and what does that look like? What does success look like? So that's really the most important success step. And so all of these, I call them the D steps. You go from discover to define. Then you can, after you've done that, design your solutions, develop, deliver, and detail results. Pretty much every marketing agency you might run into will have some sort of problem-solving process like this. When Julie and I worked at Carlson Marketing Group, there was a similar process called GROW. And that stuck with me because I just like the acronym. It stands for goals, reality, options, and way forward. And so it's a simple way of remembering all of this as well. So start by defining your goals. What's the reality? So that's maybe these 2 steps flip-flopped a little bit, but taken together, what's the reality around the situation? What are my options? And how am I going to go forward? So whichever your plan, make sure you start with this and start with that diagnosing before prescribing. So once we've done that, we can get into the growth formula. So when we're trying to put together a roadmap for how to double our sales, we're talking about creating predictable growth by using a holistic approach to documenting how strangers become prospects, prospects become your customers, and customers become your raving fans. And it's a very simple formula with a lot of parts to it. This is probably like a 3-day workshop worth of information that will compress into about 50 minutes. But again, it starts with having those detailed measures, and we'll walk through this. So it really means having SMART goals, having your scorecard in order. Next would be your growth roadmap. And so that's sort of the engine of how this is going to work. So it includes what you do in terms of discovery, but really then your growth engine and documenting your customer value journey. And then finally, the third piece of this are tools and resources. And what we mean by that, peso tactics. I'll come back to peso in a moment, but your marketing tactics, your messaging tools, your technology tools. It also includes things like your internal and external resources and having a sustainable budget. So what happens if you don't have all of these pieces in place is that sometimes you can run into partial results. So for example, if maybe you've got detailed measures in place and a roadmap, so we call that running in place. You know where you're going, but you don't really have a way of getting there. Let's say you've got the roadmap and the tools in place. Well, that's like being a bull in a china shop. There's lots of activity, but no way of really knowing what's working because you don't have a scorecard. And then finally, you might have your scorecard and your tools, and we call that being one-hit wonders. So tactics work until they don't, because you don't have that roadmap to, portion to really keep things on track as well. So what we're really aiming for is the sweet spot in the center of this, where all three of these come together. So let's start by talking about the detailed measures, and just continuing our Ted Lasso theme. I think he would put Coach Beard in charge of this because he knows all the measures and all the scorecards. He knows how to keep track for us. So real simple. I mean, the first part of this is developing SMART objectives around your goal. So remember, we said, how are we going to define success? And I think most of us know this. SMART goals are specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. So something that's not SMART, for example, is I want to increase my social media followers. A smart way of doing this, though, would be to say, I want to generate 1,000 engagements from my LinkedIn posts by December 31st, 2021. So is that specific? I think so. It's specific to 1,000 engagements into LinkedIn. Is it measurable? Yes, I've got a measure. Is it attainable? Let's hope so. For this particular scenario, is it relevant? It's probably more relevant than just having social followers, because engagements, I think, are where you really drive that stickiness. And is it time bound? So once you've put together your SMART goals, I recommend putting them into a scorecard. And this is just a sample scorecard that I like to use. On the top, you'll see columns. So your start date of when did you first start keeping track and what was that baseline. And then you can have a column for today's date and a column for your goal date. And then after that, you'll see a scale, sort of 1, 3, and 5, and a status column for what I like to call just green, yellow, red. So just a way of kind of keeping track. And what that scale is then is, if I'm like at a 1 or 2, I'm in the red, and so this is the low end of what I'm looking for. 3 is okay, and 5, 4s and 5s are where I really want to be. So you can tie those to your green, yellow, red, and by applying green, yellow, red, when you're meeting with yourself or with others in your group, you can quickly see where you need to provide the most attention. On the left are a series of categories, and not everybody's going to have the same goals or scorecard, but these are just some sample ideas. The ones at the top, I think, are the ones that might go into your actual key business indicators. Ultimately, and with the last one of these key business indicators probably being your revenue, per month, per year, what have you, however you're tracking your revenue. And then below that, you could have some key performance indicators, things that maybe don't tie directly into sales revenue, but will tie indirectly. Things like social engagement or a net promoter score, things like that. So those are the detailed measures. So next would be the growth roadmap. So what's your strategy for getting there? And so we know, Ted Lasso people know that Coach Nate is great at strategy. So he's going to help us with the growth roadmap. Where this all comes from is, based on the premise, nothing happens until someone sells something. And if any of you worked for Carlson companies over the years, you probably heard that phrase once or twice. We always attributed that to Kurt Carlson. If you look it up online, it seems like it's got a number of potential authors for that. But the reality is, nothing else in your business happens until someone sells something. And I'd like to say yes, but with a qualification. Does anybody here like to be sold to? And feel free to answer in chat. And if you'd like to be sold to, well, we won't be calling on you. But really, most of us don't like to be sold to. We like to buy something. We like to buy something that we feel meets our needs, whether it's a B2C situation or if I'm buying something for my business. And so what the rule of 7 says is that buyer will need to have at least 7 interactions with your brand before making a purchase. And some sources say that's range is even higher to 5 or 20. So in other words, if I just send somebody an email or put a post on LinkedIn, I'm not likely to get somebody to make that purchase. There needs to be a sustainable approach and campaign to making sure that people are going to have at least those 7 interactions. So what do those interactions look like? Beyond seeing your product in a store, some of the marketing tactics that can go into those 7 touch points, we call PESO. They stands for paid, earned, shared, or owned marketing tactics. So what do I mean by that? So owned media, those would be things that you can control directly yourself. So your own content marketing. It might be videos you put together or webinars that you host, any sort of visual content or audio, your podcasts, case studies you put together, your own packaging, etc. It also includes any work that you do on search engine optimization. So your own effort into how your brand will be seen and searched for. Next would be paid, things, and so paid would be those things that we think of typically as advertising, things that we're going to pay for. So traditional newspaper, radio, television advertising, out of home advertising, digital advertising, any social media that you pay for type advertising. Also things that cost money, such as if you want to do any sort of email marketing or have any sort of contests or quizzes along with that. Or if you're going to spend money on events or experiential marketing, maybe open houses or grand openings or going to an event. So those are all things that are paid. Earned media, that's the media coverage that you might earn from public relations activities or engaging media. Maybe you engage them online and earn coverage in a publication. It also includes word of mouth that you get from, which is one of the most important types of touch point, is getting people to be your advocate and telling their friends. And then finally, the shared bubble. So these things include things like community engagement or speaking engagements like I'm doing today. It might be partnerships, charity tie-ins, community service, co-branding, and finally shared media like social media, as well as content reviews, user-generated content, etc. So all of these things might, any of these things could potentially be part of the 7 touch points that somebody would experience. And they all add up then to what I call sales enablement, or creating a fertile ground for a selling conversation or selling opportunity, because they help create credibility and trust and thought leadership and your brand reputation. And by the way, if I'm going too fast or have any questions, feel free to put your questions in the chat. We'll answer them at the end of our session. So really then a lot of us have seen, how do we take all of this? We've seen sort of a traditional growth engine or a funnel, if you will, of up at top are the people that aren't aware yet of me or my product or my company. And so I'm going to drive them to my website. And then I might get them to fill out a contact form. And from there, I can make a sales call or a presentation. I can create a proposal. Ultimately, I'm going to have purchases. And from those people who are buyers, I'll have advocates. And those advocates are going to be people who buy multiple times from me, repeat purchases, or they might purchase something different the next time. They provide referrals, they provide case studies and testimonials. So this is, sort of the traditional funnel, and nothing wrong with it. I use it. It's important to kind of understand internally, but this is really the internal view of how you look at the customer. But for our roadmap, for our growth roadmap, what I would really encourage you to do is to think about the customer value journey from the customer's perspective and how they go from awareness to engagement to subscribing to something to converting or making a purchase, and then ultimately deepening that purchase and becoming a promoter. So the goal with understanding this journey is really to create that predictable flow of customers by meshing the customer's interests with my interests as a small business owner. And then next, I want to align business objectives across my organization and use this to create a shared vocabulary. So if there's others, everybody knows what we're talking about and we're on the same page. The best way to do this to get started is by developing a buyer persona. And I know this is an eye chart. I'm not expecting anybody to read all of this, and I'm not going to read it all here. But a lot of times what we think of is we think of in terms of a target market. So a target market might be a particular demographic or a particular, maybe I'm looking for urban mothers between the ages of 30 and 40 or what have you. But a buyer persona is taking a particular person or individual within that target market and adding some personality and depth around them. And this could be a buyer of a B2C product. It could be a buyer of a B2B product. This one is a little bit aimed more at a B2B buyer, but the principles are the same. And so you want to go deeper into their background in terms of, if it's a B2B, like how long have they been with this particular type of company? What roles have they been in? How big is their organization? What are their demographics? So the basic demographics like the target would have. And then get into their, things like their work style and communication preferences, and ultimately their business goals. What are their goals and challenges that they're trying to solve, and how big are these challenges? The next question is, where does this buyer go for information? So this, this will help you to know, do they typically go to coworkers? Do they go to industry events? Do they read any particular publications? Where can I go to influence these particular buyers? On the right then are, what can we do, and what would that scenario look like if we engage with this person? And so what are the key purchase drivers? Is it price? Is it quality? Is it timeline? What's most important for this particular type of driver, more so maybe than other purchase drivers? What are some of the common objections they might have? And then finally, what does this buyer's situation look like? How do they feel after choosing your solution? So with all of that information, we can create another eye chart. But these two are really the most important, I think, kind of pieces to the roadmap. The persona and then the value journey matrix. And again, I won't ask anybody to read this or read along, but the matrix takes that value journey. And everyone might be a little bit different, but these are kind of some of the 6 most common stages across the top, of awareness to engagement to subscribing. And for each of these stages, we're going to think in terms put ourselves in the customer's shoes. So what are some typical questions and issues I might have if I'm the customer? So in that first stage of awareness, they might be thinking, well, I have a problem who can help me with this? And so how do they feel about it? Well, they feel stressed out. They might have a deadline or a project they don't know how to approach. Where do they go, for a source of information on this? Do they go online and Google it, or do they go to their friends, or where do they look to for information? So then next we can start to think in terms of, well, what do we need to do? So meshing the customer's interests with our interests. So we need to raise awareness or broaden our geography maybe, or drive our search engine optimization in this stage. And so I'm going to use different tools like social media or media coverage or advertising or whatever that marketing mix is. And finally, the final row is what's the call to action for each of these steps. So for each of these stages across the top, awareness, engagement, subscribe, put yourself in your buyer or potential buyer's shoes using your persona and answer each of these questions. Think about how the buyer will feel and how you're going to change that, and what's that process for what that looks like. Ultimately, then it's going to mesh back, or it should, with the growth engine that you created, your internal funnel. So from awareness to engagement, just really similar steps, but it's adding much more depth to your growth engine. Finally, I would suggest that each of these steps be facilitated and tracked via an automation tool or a CRM tool like a HubSpot, or there's certainly dozens of potential tools that you might use. So finally, the third step of our growth formula are the tools and resources. So we know who's excellent at the skill set, and that's Coach Roy Kent from Ted Lasso. So he's going to help us with the toolbox. And quite simply, it's thinking about all the different pieces that we've looked at here and what are the different tools that go into this. So this is just a sample, but in the discovery phase, you might have tools, questions that you ask. I call it a growth audit or a marketing inventory report, where you're just going to kind of keep track all of the different pieces that you have so far and identifying where you might have gaps. You might put together a SWOT analysis, which explores the strengths and weaknesses and opportunities and threats that your business faces. And so, again, I won't read all of these, but it's important to have the toolbox that covers all the discovery phases, the value journey phases, et cetera, that we're going to go through. So I've got just a couple of tools that I'll share here. One is a value proposition builder. And so this is something that you can use to build. This is, again, internal. What's really unique about my product, and how can I articulate that, at least internally, to start? And so ask yourself these kinds of questions. So for my target audience, what kind of buyer, what kind of role? So for Minneapolis Business Mentors, for example, we're not selling anything. We're a volunteer organization, but we still have a value proposition for ourselves. So for us, we're saying for current or prospective small business owners, primarily based in the Twin Cities area. Next, what's their need? What's their core need driving them to make a purchase? So for us, we're saying we're looking for people who are looking to improve their existing business or considering a new opportunity or looking to make a change. Next, what's your offer? What's your product or service that you're offering? So Minneapolis Business Mentors offers a variety of free advice services, including one-to-one mentoring, peer groups, business plan reviews, and more. And then what makes this unique? So for us, what we feel is unique is our Business Advisory Council is the only service of its kind in the area where entrepreneurs can get free feedback from a panel of experienced executives. And finally, what's the value that we provide? So in our example, we help our clients to achieve their goals and improve their lives. So simple tool, but if you haven't already looked at your business this way, I would suggest this is a good way to start. Once you do this, make sure you do a quick checklist, because it's really important that your value proposition be these three things: relevant, believable, and differentiating. And most of us, I think, are good at the first two. So looking at looking at this for Minneapolis business mentors, is it, are we relevant? Yeah, I think so, because we know there's many people who see themselves in this situation. Is it believable? I hope so. I think that everything that we're doing is pretty believable. And is it relevant? And that's where that what makes it unique question comes in. So is it differentiating? That's really one of the keys, to think about what makes your business unique. And if you don't have something yet, think about what that could be. Next, you can take this and take all these pieces and put together sort of a messaging hierarchy that helps you to articulate and demonstrate internally how all these pieces fit together. So you can start with the core values, what's most important to your organization, and then add differentiators. So what's different about your organization, add that value proposition that you just created, and then reasons to believe. And I believe it or not, I have a typo, and I have to do a spot check here on my an instant correction here. Now, hopefully I didn't lose the, I bet I did. I stopped sharing my screen, didn't I? Sorry about that. I just couldn't bear to have a typo on the screen. Julie, can you see my screen again?
I can.
Excellent. Okay.
Can everybody else see the screen?
Good to go?
Good. Go on. Yeah.
I had to have a real-time typo fix there. Sorry about that. And then, so finally, reasons to believe. What are, why should somebody believe this value proposition or these differentiators? So what are those kind of key facts, like, having an experienced team, for example, for us, having client testimonials, case studies. Those are things that everybody should be able to put together. Next, what are those desired client perceptions? You could get this from your persona that you put together. And ultimately, what are the use cases? So how am I going to use this for my business? So I'm going to use it to put together my elevator speech, or my sales collateral, or advertising copy, or my SEO keywords, or my talking points, what have you. So all of these things, can be part of your toolkit. Ultimately, what's the purpose of having all these? Well, so these tools and many others that you can use along the way help you to refine your product and define, from a marketing perspective, you've got the 4 Ps: product, price, place, and promotion. So maybe for promotion, it might help guide you to particular offers that you might have. It also can help you then put together your overall marketing plan. It can help you put together creative briefs that you would use to, maybe if you're engaging somebody else, a freelancer or an agency, to help them understand what you're looking for. And ultimately, then it can lead you to the right mix of peso tactics that's right for your business. You don't have to have everything on the peso slide or any of these slides, but it's just important to be familiar with everything that's at your disposal that can help you to double your sales. So how does this double your sales? Well, if we improve each step on this scale by just 12%, that will add up to a cumulative 100% total improvement. So in practice, you might focus on one area or another, more than another, but the end goal is still the same. And if I go back to my sample scorecard, let's say I'm starting at $156,000 a month of revenue, and my goal here, let's say, is 308. So just under 100% improvement in this example. So have that end in mind in terms of where you want to be. It might be, I don't care if it's 6 months, 2 years, 5 years, or whatever, but have that plan in mind as far as how you're going to, at what point are you going to increase your goals. So as Coach Kent would say, don't you dare settle for fine. So make sure you think about how you're going to double your sales and get to your next level. Any questions with that?
Steve Gerton had a question earlier. Paul, and it said, can you share a sample of the scorecard? Can we make that available on MB Mentors resources?
Absolutely. Yes. So what I'm not sure. I think what everybody will need to do is shoot me a quick email, and I can share this slide deck. I'm not sure I have your emails otherwise as a presenter. And at the end of the deck, you'll see my sorry.
I'm going to put it into the chat, Paul, too.
Yeah, that's paul.richardson@mbmentors.org.
Any other questions from anyone? We had a nice crowd here today. We appreciate you all taking this time, particularly at the end of the day, as I'm sure you've had a busy day. And as Paul mentioned, we encourage you to go out to mbmentors.org, and there are a number of tools available on the website. You can also reach out to Paul or myself or any of the other mentors. As Paul mentioned, this is a free service, so feel free to reach out to us. You can go out and send us emails, and we will respond to you within the 24 hours of receiving the email. Paul, you had a couple of other things you wanted to share?
Yeah, and just the slide that's up right now as well is you can see we've got this was the second of 4 webinars presented by Minneapolis Business Mentors during Startup Week. And so there's 2 remaining on Thursday, Marketing Basics for the Non-Marketer by Ben Markovitz, one of our mentors, retired from 3M. So he's a fantastic presenter and marketer. So that'll build, I think, on some of the concepts we touched on here. And then also how to design and deliver an elevator speech. So you can, that value proposition I started was sort of the first step. And then one of the next steps is how does that flow into that 30-second elevator speech that you might create. And then just in general, we've got a full schedule of webinars coming up as well that you'll see on our site. And so next week, Business Plan Basics, and then on October 5th, Business Legal Entities. So much more.
Grace Nance had a question. Can you possibly go back to the peso slide? Or, she wanted to, again, ask the question, what does peso stand for?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me.
Since we have time, we can go back. If anybody else wants to review any of the other concepts, we have time to go back and take a look at those slides.
Overshot the mark.
There you go.
So PESO, again, stands for paid, earned, shared, and owned, the different types of marketing touch points that you could leverage. Don't feel like you need to leverage all of them at once, but this is just sort of a sampling and a way of thinking about the different ways that you can get your message out and create sales enablement, that sweet spot in the center of credibility and trust and thought leadership and brand reputation.